The first step is going to be assembling the FPV setup. And you're going to want to solder your VTX directly to the back of the camera. So what we're going to do is go ahead and desolder all these wires. We're also going to desolder this microphone and flip it up so it's not hanging out of the bottom. A good length for these wires is 4 centimeters. So go ahead, cut your wires and solder them onto the camera. Make sure when you solder them down this way instead of this way, because you want there to be some clearance underneath the camera so it can swing along the carbon fiber to adjust the angle. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this to 4 centimeters, solder this on here. I'll be right back. Okay, so I got my FPV set up all ready to go. The video transmitter is soldered to the camera. I also flipped this microphone upside down. Make sure not to reverse the polarity. Polarity does matter with that. There's a little black positive symbol under there on this right pin here. So once you get that all soldered up, you're ready to insert the camera into the adjustable angle camera mount. So for this step, you do need to glue the camera into the mount. I'm going to go ahead and take a little bit of super glue and put it in to the bottom and the sides, bottom of the camera mount. Make sure you put it into the bottom. Now the microphone and all these wires are soldered onto the bottom of the camera, so that's going to go right into there. And now I'm going to hold this while it dries. You want to make sure you hold the camera level in the mount, as well as make sure that these tabs stay level. It doesn't actually look like I got too much glue down here on this side, so I'm going to add a little bit. You want to make sure your camera is sturdy in this mount, because if it's not, it could cause a lot of camera jello. And then you're going to want to glue the top. Do the same thing. Make sure you get enough glue on it. You don't want any camera jello. Make sure while you're doing this that you don't get any super glue on the lens of your camera. Once the glue dries on the camera mount, you can go ahead and start inserting it into the canopy. So the first thing you want to do is remove the antenna from the video transmitter, and you're going to want to slide that little tab that the antenna mounts to through this little slot here. You're going to make sure that the LED display fits into, there will be a little square right here. And that's where this little display is going to poke up through. So you're going to stick the antenna tab under that slot, and then pull this tab over the board. Make sure the VTX is flush with the top of the canopy. Now I like to twist these wires here a little bit. Make sure you don't twist them so much that you pull the solder pads off of here. make sure your camera is upright. The microphone is on the bottom of it. And you're going to want to stick these two little spindles through these two little holes. Again, making sure your camera is right side up. And now you should get out this little bag of screws. You should have two different bags of screws. One will have all M1.4 by 4.5 screws, and it'll contain 18 of those. And the other bag will contain a mix of a quantity of 5 M1.4 by 6 millimeter screws and 3 M1.4 by 3 millimeter screws. There's an extra of each screw. The small ones, the 3 millimeter screws, are for the camera mounts, and the large ones are going to hold the flight controller mount to the base plate. I'll show you how those go later. So you're going to want to get two of these screws out of the kit. It's the M1.4 by 3. It's going to be the smallest screw in the kit. You're going to need to set the camera at whatever angle you want, and I usually set it at 30 degrees. It's usually a good angle for flying a 3-cell. 45 isn't bad either, but sometimes I like to just slow down a little bit and hover around my yard. Once you get it through the desired hole, you're going to want to make sure the spindles are still through the holes on the outside of the canopy, and you're going to want to screw that right into the camera mount. Well, since you're screwing into TPU, it's going to almost feel like you strip them out when you get to the bottom. That's fine. That just lets you know it's all the way in. You can't really strip these out. The TPU holes are printed small enough so that the threads will grip, but they won't strip anything out in a crash. That's why I threw in a couple extra screws too. So in a really hard crash, the worst you're going to do to this thing is lose a couple screws. So you have two options here. You can either cut this plug off and solder this power directly to 5 volt on your flight control board, which is what I usually do. You can also get the male end of this plug and solder it onto the board so you can attach and detach this whenever you need to. Now the next thing is going to be inserting your antenna. You just flip this backwards, and you're going to plug your antenna right into the board. And again, make sure your video transmitter stays up in place. And then make sure this cord wraps around where the buzzer is going to go and sticks up through the hole in the back. It's going to pop out that top. So all you do is just push it right into there until the bottom's flush. What you can do at this point too to keep your video transmitter from getting loose or anything is to put a little dab of hot glue under this tab. You can lift it up and just a little dab under there. And that completes the video transmitter and the FPV setup. So the next thing we're going to do is take the 1mm carbon fiber top plate and screw it onto the top of the canopy. You're going to need 8 of the M 1.4 by 4.5 screws for this. The Max Femto is soft mounted, and it comes with two of these little double-sided tape pads. What I usually do is cut the corners off of it to make it fit the Femto a little better, and I also cut out little spots for this chip here and this little resistor up here, and I do that so that the board sits a little more flush onto the flight control mount. So once you get everything soldered onto your board, you're going to go ahead and stick it down to your flight controller mount. Again, make sure this arrow is pointing the front, and this cutout goes in the rear. And you're going to want to hot glue. I usually put a little dab of hot glue up under there to keep your receiver from moving around at all. So I'm not actually soldering this board together right now. I'll leave that to your imagination. But we'll pretend that this has ESCs sticking off of it, that the receiver is attached, and that the beeper is also hanging off of it. The bumpers. Now, this is the top. These are going to go on the top, not the bottom. And these circles here in the bumper, they also go in the top, not the bottom. If you put them on this way, go ahead, screw your canopy on and fly. There will be nothing holding this on, it'll just fall off. So make sure these are right side up. Like I said, we will assume that that is all soldered together. You can imagine ESC sticking off of here. Now, this is where you have a choice. You can either solder this wire directly onto the board, or you can solder a connector onto the board and be able to remove detach the canopy completely from the base plate, should you need to. So once you get everything all soldered down, go ahead and pop your beeper, which should be soldered to the board, into the beeper holder. You can use a little screwdriver or something to push the end in to make sure it's all the way in. Now, the flight controller and the flight controller mount goes right onto the canopy like this. And then you're going to want to put the canopy directly on the top. You're going to make sure these standoffs here go through the hole on the bumper for the front as well as the rear. Also, I like to make sure these receiver wires come out that hole and that little hole. So now you're going to want to take your M1.4 by 6 screws. These are the longest screws in the kit. You're going to want to take 4 of them and put them in these 4 holes, the center 4 holes. They're going to go up through the flight control mount and into these center standoffs and hold the flight controller into the frame. So now that you got those 4 screws in there, you're going to need 4 M1.4 by 4.5 screws. That's the one that there are the most of in the kit. And those are going to go up through the bumper and into the standoffs. Okay, so now your frame should be mostly assembled. Your flight controller should be attached to the flight controller mount, and you should have the ESCs coming out. Usually what I do at this point is take 4 10mm diameter pieces of heat shrink. I cut them down to 22mm in length, and I stretch them right over each arm and over the ESCs on each arm to secure the ESCs down. That's optional. You can always use electrical tape after you solder the motors on. I think it looks a little cleaner with heat shrink personally, but it's up to you. Now you're going to want to solder all 4 motors to your ESCs at this point, and put these on here. And once the motor is soldered to the ESC, go ahead and screw your motor right onto the mount. So after everything's all put together, your canopy should be screwed down to the base frame, but just to show you guys, this is what you end up with here. You're gonna have the beeper in its holder up here, flight controller on the flight controller mount, your serial receiver should fit back here. It can slide up under the flight control mount a ways if it has to. What I do back here is usually touch a hot glue gun to the edge to make a little divot where your power cord can come out. It's not necessary. You can bring it out through the side if you want, and you can really do whatever you want with the power cord there. You can even bring it out through one of these holes if you can get access to them. Then once you get your frame assembled, you can go ahead and stick on your anti-slip silicone battery pad here. And your battery strap is going to go underneath the flight controller mount. You can see there's a little slot that goes the whole way through. Stick it right through there. And that's where you can mount your battery. This is the green frame kit. It also comes in red, blue, and black. And then here's a blue one. There's a red one I was out flying earlier today. And this is with the Emax 1106 red bottoms. 6,000 kV motors. So I hope you guys enjoyed the build video. Good luck on your builds. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask. Comments, just leave them below. Thanks.